that was very apparent to me on set, that just like the process of shooting on film, had a certain energy to it that was kind of delicious.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Kodakery. I'm Megan.
And I'm Josh.
To discuss the film Love After Love, this week Russ Harbaugh, writer and director, and Chris Teague, cinematographer, joined us. Love After Love began as a short, which premiered at Sundance in 2012, and has now found its way to the big screen. Russ and Chris eloquently share the path this film took to come to fruition, the importance film played, and why a meaningful, creative idea is worth seeing through until the end. So, let's jump into the Kodakery and talk with them.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Kodakery. Today in the Kodakery, Megan and I are thrilled to welcome not one, but two guests to the show. Writer-director Russ Harbaugh and cinematographer Chris Teague for the new film Love After Love, which premieres nationwide on April 6th. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Russ, let's start with you. Where did the inspiration for this story begin?
Oof, there's no short answer to that. Inspiration came. I lost my father shortly before moving to New York to start grad school, which is where I met Chris. We met at Columbia. Chris had shot this short, Salt Kiss, that Felipe Barbosa made. And when I was an incoming student, I saw that short and loved it and was very excited to go to Columbia. But I'm from Indiana and didn't know movies that well. I grew up in a house that both my parents were theater professors, and I grew up around the theater, but where I'm from in Indiana, we didn't have an art house theater, and so my film school was a process of kind of like finding the kind of catalog of movies that I really felt like I could belong to, and that kind of happened concurrently with processing whatever grief is, I guess, trying to kind of find my place in movies at the same time that I was kind of trying to work through losing my dad. And eventually my mom started to date again around the same time that I found a couple of movies that felt like I wanted to figure out how they worked. And so Chris and I made a short in 2010 called Rolling on the Floor Laughing. That was the first kind of attempt at both writing about what was going on with my family and also experimenting with some ideas about how you could make a movie that had a kind of chaotic life in front of the camera, but that the camera could be more formal and expressive and deliberate. And so that was in 2010. The short played Sundance in 2012, and Eric Mendelsohn and Eric was a teacher of mine at Columbia. We started working on the feature draft of the script in 2012, 2013, and yeah, so it took about 5 years to get the project put together. We shot in 2015.
Oh, sorry, I realized that was, I guess, a pretty loaded question right from the get-go.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
But you answered it really well. Yeah, maybe I could give a flavor for those listening that haven't seen it yet. It's a very human and emotional story about a family whose, a husband of the wife and father of these two boys passes away, and just sort of how life changes and how they experience love after that. And actually, I was wondering about the title, Love After Love, because I felt like it could be interpreted in a few different ways, like, the love you experience after you've loved someone, or like love chasing love, like love after, going after love, or love after love after love, which is kind of what I feel like Chris O'Dowd's character does. But how did you mean for the title to come across?
I think I liked that it felt like a kind of tumble.
Right.
And that the movie very early on, we kind of had, Eric and I would have these, we developed a shorthand that would help guide our work. And one of the kind of overriding ideas was, can we structure a movie? Can we write a movie that will get at this feeling of not being able to catch up to your own life? That was a really kind of prominent sensation that I had in the wake of losing my dad, that it was just kind of too many events kind of stacked up next to each other. I fell in love. My brother fell in love. I moved in with the girlfriend. He moved in with his girlfriend. He was getting married at the same time that I was breaking up with my girlfriend who I had cheated on, and it was just like this, my aunt died, my grandmother died. It just felt like this kind of roar of life. And my brother, who is a book editor, and I was living in his office in his apartment literally the week that he was getting married, and he at one point pulled off of his shelf this book of Derek Walcott poems, and he said, "Do you know this poem, Love After Love?" And he read it, and the last line of it is "Feast on your life." And I loved the poem, and there was something about both the sentiment that the poem was getting at, which is basically about being alone, and the kind of tumble of the title that felt like it matched whatever we were trying to do in this script. And we didn't think too hard about it. It sounded good, and I brought it up with Eric, and he was like, "That's the title," and then that was it.
Yeah, it works well.
Yeah. So were a lot of the voices for the characters in the script, were those coming from your own life experiences, people you knew, your own family? I mean, certainly there's inspiration there from what you're saying, but or were there some that you just created whole cloth for the film that are just new characters that kind of came out of your imagination?
It's a mix of both. Yeah, there were some things that were basically the sequence when the dad is ill and the family's waiting for him to die in the living room. Basically, those are scenes that were kind of directly taken from my memory. And then the rest of it was, it's all fiction, and it was built, to get at the kind of feeling that I remember from the time, but not the literal events, with some exceptions. The hotel sequence in the middle is loosely based on anecdotes that my mom would tell about her dating, and but yeah, most of the movie is, totally fiction.
And you mentioned meeting Chris in grad school, and you guys worked on Rolling on the Floor Laughing. So I guess he was an obvious choice to work with for Love After Love. But maybe you guys could, we'll start with Chris, tell us a little bit about what your working relationship is like in bringing the film to life.
Sure. I mean, since we both went to Columbia for film school, I feel like you kind of start from a different place than I have with other directors. It just feels like we have more of a shared language, and on top of that, the fact that Russ and I are good friends and share a lot of the same taste in film, and I just feel like I had a good sense of where he was coming from, and a real desire to kind of go out on a limb with him and take as many risks as we could, and so that process of figuring out how to shoot the movie was so fun and involved, and kind of this endless conversation that was, watching movies that we loved, sequences that we loved, and breaking them apart and trying to understand how you kind of arrive at a feeling that is so sophisticated. Like, I'm sure Russ can talk more about the specific films that inspired us, but, kind of trying to reverse engineer that stuff is can be incredibly difficult, and sometimes you're watching a film and you're just wondering how it came to be, and you feel like the more you start to consciously think about trying to create that feeling, the more you're not going to be able to do it, right. Which is sort of a weird thing. But I think what we kept on coming back to is this idea of trying to make something that felt on one level formal and composed, but on another level, as if it's just kind of happening before you for the first time in front of your eyes, and you're right there with these characters, but there's nothing that feels rehearsed or structured about it. And those seem like two completely contradictory ideas, and that became a very kind of lively and difficult conversation to figure out how do you do that? And I feel like we approached it in the movie in a lot of different ways. And I guess the fun thing about, knowing each other so well and having such trust was that, when we were talking about how to shoot the movie, it was like there were no wrong answers about how, what direction we went in. And so, our shot listing sessions weren't about so-and-so walks in the door and looks at somebody and the other person stands up. It was like, Russ is telling stories about things that happened in his life, and I'm telling stories, and we're coming out like just to get at like what those feelings were, and then what that might feel like to put a camera in front of it and where that camera might go. So it was like a very high-level conversation, and it started, I feel like, 6 or 7 weeks before we started shooting, which is way more prep time than I usually get to have on a movie, and it never really finished. I mean, it would just kept going, and we kept talking about, how we were going to shoot these things. And, as we started actually shooting the film, we were learning as we were going and changing things based on that. So it was very rich and lively and involved and not super structured. And I say that in a really good way, because I feel like because we had a kind of shared vocabulary, we were still able to come together and land on some really great ideas and fun ways for shooting things.
Yeah, and I think that, I love all that stuff he just said. It gets me excited. I want to go back and do it again. But even from the script stage, we were kind of interested in trying to make a movie that felt accidental, that would kind of accumulate scenes that at first would be, disorienting and a kind of a whirlwind of action that you have to kind of catch up to, and eventually you could fall into the story. And in order to make that happen, on the page, Eric and I had to be very specific about, well, why are we showing this next to this next to this? Even if an audience isn't going to, be able to pick up on it, we have to kind of be in control of that on the page. And then with Teague, we had to be, the kind of chaotic action, the kind of the feeling of like an accidental capture of an image is like, that a movie could be made out of that is such a fun idea to me, and I think was to him also. And that really requires that the way you're photographing the scene, that the camera has to be doing work to kind of ground an audience emotionally into some kind of narrative hook, even if they don't know it yet. That the camera needs to be doing kind of real strong work, saying I know this is chaotic, but look at this. So, for instance, the beginning of the movie, it really is like a whirlwind. It's at a party. There's a ton of characters. But, one of the things we trusted was that the beginning of the movie was going to, introduce kind of which character belonged to who. And that the rest of the movie was going to juggle those alliances, and that we just kind of believed that would have an inherent, kind of tension to it. But it was fun. I like how Chris describes it as being this investigation, because I think that really is what it was. That we didn't, at no point were we we would even come up with shots and then get on set, obviously, and not be able to pull them off because the room was smaller or something like that. And so we would always return to well, what's the kind of emotional requirement of the scene, or what's the thing that an audience needs to kind of be told to look at in an otherwise kind of chaotic scene.
Yeah, the scenes are so emotive that's I feel like you're relying heavily on the actors' performances, and that you're just kind of there to be in the mix of it, and let them shine throughout. Chris, how do you interact with the actors during those sort of intimate emotional moments?
It's a good question. With a lot of respect and care and, an understanding that they're making themselves extremely vulnerable in front of everyone else. I used to think when I was younger, I thought, actors are all extroverts. They just love to get in front of people and say their lines, and it's like that's just what gives them so much pleasure. And I never wanted to be an actor, but I took an acting course, a weekend course, to sort of see what that felt like, and got such a completely different perspective on that experience, which was so eye-opening for me. And that on top of going to working at the Sundance Labs as a DP, which is a very kind of actor-focused, performance-focused experience, and getting to see that as much as an actor might feel like they are completely in control of what they're doing in front of the camera, there's a huge leap of faith that goes into that. And if you walk into, a difficult scene with that understanding, I think you're going to, and you're going to project a sense of respect and care that's going to help them be able to do what they need to do in front of the camera.
Right. Yeah, that's smart to take an acting class like that.
Well, and Russ, how about the same question for you as a director coming into a scene? How are you working with the actors to get the performance that you want?
Well, I think what Chris just said is the most important thing, and I think the whole crew has the responsibility to kind of create environments that feel, safe enough for an actor to kind of get lost in. From my perspective, I talk to them a lot about being okay with embarrassing themselves, that they can trust me, that I'm not going to... I think any artist worth their salt kind of needs to be comfortable with the idea that in order to kind of get the next level of... to make beautiful things, you have to be willing to move through potentially embarrassing work.
Sure.
That it's... that good work is often kind of tied to one's ability to kind of endure that kind of fear. And so, what Chris said, I think, is absolutely right, that it's like you have to kind of approach the environments in a way that kind of allows people to feel like they can do that work. And I think that's true not just for actors, but kind of all the department heads. The movie has such a pronounced personality, and that's the part of it that I think I'm most proud of, and it's a function of like Chris and Aaron McGill, who did the production design, and Sarah Mae Burton, who did the costumes, really being allowed to come in with ideas that were kind of in the direction of, kind of what we would talk about globally as like what we were interested in kind of trying to get, which is this kind of accidental movie that gets at this feeling of I can't catch up, and turning them loose to kind of do their work. That's the part of the movie that I think is the most beautiful, is that it's like the kind of harmony of all these different artists kind of really taking risks. So to bring it back to the actors, I think that's we didn't have a ton of rehearsal time or anything like that, but I think that the work that you kind of have to do initially is to just kind of get intimate with one another as a way of kind of, developing a real trust, which kind of can't totally happen until you're making the movie. I mean, that's one thing that I think we ran into, is that if we were to shoot the movie again, I'm not sure we would shoot it in the same order, because some of the early scenes in the movie, which we shot early on in the shoot, kind of demanded a kind of intimacy and comfort between everyone that didn't really exist yet. And so we kind of had to manufacture it some in the edit in a way that I wasn't anticipating. But I think, like building, it's about like allowing the environments that are in front of the camera, because at some point you take the lens cap off the camera and whatever's in front of the camera is going to be the movie. And so I think it's just really about collectively caring for that environment that's in front of the camera, so that an actor can feel as if they're able to take risks and feel free and go play with each other, in a way that they're not thinking about, am I doing it right?
Right.
Absolutely.
And you were just talking about editing. One of Megan and I interviewed Sean Baker from the Florida Project a few episodes back, and one of the quotes that he had that I wanted to ask you about, because he also wrote and directed a film, is he said that he essentially wrote the movie 3 times: when he wrote the screenplay, when he directed the film, and when he edited the film. And was that your experience, or did the final product that you came out with, was it what you envisioned way back when you were writing the script?
Well, first, I totally agree with that, and second is I don't think it's possible that I think anyone who's ever tried to draw a sketch of something knows that the process, the kind of movement from the abstract idea of the image to the literal marks on a page, that's like a kind of violent, gruesome process, and it's like that the thing on the page never quite resembles the thing that was in your head. And so I think you're constantly just kind of closing the gap between the thing that motivated the kind of creation of the thing and what the thing looks like in front of you. And so, I think that movies are so beautiful because they have such a long kind of, process of creation, that there are these like different stages, and that each stage is kind of about developing further the idea of what the object's going to be. And so I totally agree that in the edit room you're writing again, and in some ways it's better. I mean, it's like, I love editing. It's so free. Like you don't have to guess at what the pictures are. You can play around and put one picture next to another picture next to another one, and kind of start to feel these associations and the rhythm of images. And it really is like you're finally writing with the material of the movie, that you don't have to kind of guess at what it's going to look like that day, what the weather's going to be, what the clothes are going to look like, what the actors, tone of voice is going to be, all that stuff. When I write, you're really having to kind of guess at what it's going to be like. And so I love in the edit that it's plastic.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your decision to shoot this on film. It was on 16 millimeter, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so at what stage of the game did you decide that film would be the right medium?
At the earliest possible stage. I guess at the embryo stage, right? I mean, we shot Rolling on the Floor Laughing on film, and it was just for us a foregone conclusion. I don't know. I mean, I know there were discussions about it that maybe Russ was privy to early on when the feature came about, but I mean, I think we all knew we were going to shoot film, and the producers were aware of that and on board with that. And I think that's the way you have to approach it. I mean, there's been other projects where the director-producer team, or the director has said to me, well, maybe we'll shoot on film, and I'm typically those projects, it's you have to commit to that. Like, you have to really believe it from the beginning, because it's a very important choice.
Yeah, I agree. It's got to be baked into the idea in some ways, because I think we just kind of stipulated that it was essential early and didn't shut up about it. And kind of whenever those conversations would come up as we got closer to production about, maybe we can't do it, it was always like, no, this has always been how it was going to be. The movie's not going to work unless it's on film. So, and because there was this history of conversation about it, it was much harder for it to be taken away. And so, you know what I mean? It's like such that I think it's really, if you're a filmmaker who's interested in shooting on film, it's got to be like one of the earliest conversations, and then you kind of can't shut up about it.
I mean, it's the nature.
It's easy to take it away.
Yeah, the nature of, I think, making any production is the closer you get to shooting, the more your options get narrowed, just by nature of budget and resource limitations. And so, the more you kind of put your foot in the sand early on, the more of a chance you're going to be able to have things like shooting on film, or whatever other creative choices you might want to make to kind of shape the project.
And we've discussed with other guests in the past the sort of intensity and focus that shooting on film as opposed to digital brings, and especially in a film like this where the actors are giving so much of themselves. What sort of impact does shooting on film have on the set in general, and how did that impact the final performances from all the key players?
There's something that was surprising to me, and Russ, I want to hear your thoughts on this too, but just that, shooting digitally, you have this big, nice monitor for people to look at that's kind of far away from set, and it's great, but it's a large step removed from what's actually happening in the space, and what film forces you to do as a DP, as any member of the crew who's involved in shaping the image, is actually to stand next to the camera, look at the actual space you're photographing, understand what that space looks like, and what the shape of the frame is, and really interact with it in a completely different way, which was exciting. And it's funny, it was a very new experience for a lot of people who, were, just, they were looking for the monitor, like, where's the monitor? What's in frame? And our AD, Chris Carroll, kept saying, just stand next to the camera, look where it's pointed, and you will see what's in the frame. That's how everybody used to do it, and it worked fine.
Right.
And it was great. So that's how you have to start thinking about it. So it's just an interesting change in that way. And it just the way it kind of limits the amount of just peripheral kind of gear and stuff that you have on set related to image making, I think is wonderful too. It's just there's a simplification of things that's really freeing, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it sounds. This may sound overly romantic or something, but it's magic. It's that like I remember Mo Shane, who was our camera PA, who was the loader, right? Chris, I'm getting that right? Yeah. So Mo would go under his big black bag, to change a mag, and that has a real feeling to it. If you're around that happening, it has a real kind of fun, scary feeling, because it's so physical, and it could get fucked up, and there's I remember just thinking that I'm sure that every camera on every set is kind of cared for like this very special object, but I think that was very apparent to me on set, that just like the process of shooting on film, had a certain energy to it that was kind of delicious, and I think, and I'm sure that must have some effect on the actors if it has an effect on the rest of the crew. It's hard to say what exactly, but I think in terms of sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, sorry. Yeah. Well, we would. The other thing I just remembered is, when we would go watch dailies in the hotel at the end of the day, the crew was just so excited to see what we had shot. That never happens on digital. It was just every night was a little revelation, to see what we created. It felt like such a communal event. We all worked together to create this magical thing that we now get to see for the first time right here. It's so exciting.
And what invariably happens is that you're surprised by what film did in your absence. You know what I mean? It comes back, and there's a light pattern behind the trees in a shot that you didn't expect was going to be there, or there's a flare in a shot that maybe we didn't know about, or the way that the film kind of handled what you did to it sometimes kind of bends one way or the other in a way that you didn't fully expect. And so it feels like this really kind of exciting gift whenever you watch the dailies. And I think, I just remember we would all pile into a hotel room and watch, and it was so fun.
Right. Yeah. So now you guys have one of the things I wanted to ask a little bit about is how take us on the journey from getting an independent film made in the era of blockbuster franchises and all of that kind of stuff. One of the things that kind of, when I watched the trailers in the movie, it was you don't see as many movies like this anymore. They just don't seem like they get made as often as maybe they used to in a different time. So what is the journey like to make an independent film in today's world?
Well, Chris has made more movies than I have, so he can kind of talk from that perspective. I mean, from my perspective, we caught a lot of breaks. I mean, I think we had I think from the outset, we had a kind of clear, amongst ourselves, we had a kind of clear direction that we wanted to kind of play in. And went after, it just so happened that it was kind of like an adult drama, but it didn't feel, we weren't kind of trying to make a kind of art house drama. It's just what we kind of were gravitating towards or something. And then, we caught a lot of breaks. The short played Sundance, the script went through the Sundance labs. We started working with Parts and Labor, and Lucas Joaquin, who I think is one of the great New York producers right now. And Mike Prohl and Lauren Haber. Mike was a close friend of ours who produced the short, and Lauren worked for Parts and Labor, and so we started kind of accumulating people who really kind of believed in what the movie was on the page and like would protect it, because on the page the script was like very unusual, and in fact, before it went through the Sundance Labs, people would read the script and they would just be like, "What is this? This is a mess. This isn't a movie." and then after the Sundance Labs, it was like, what a bold new voice, or like how interesting, like after it kind of accumulated enough kind of superficial stamps on it, it kind of changed how the kind of commercial side of the industry started to look at it, and then it was, like actors, we kind of decided early that we wanted to shoot on film and wanted to kind of do things at a certain budget level, which meant that we kind of had to go after actors that would allow a financier to feel safe enough to give us, $1 million. And but that was a huge break. The company that financed it, Great Point Media, is a British financier, and they had made a movie with Parts and Labor called Complete Unknown that Josh Marston had made, and with Rachel Weisz and Michael Shannon. And they made that movie kind of right when Amazon was throwing their hat in the ring to compete with Netflix at Sundance and just like spending a ton of money. And they sold that movie to Amazon before they were even finished with the edit. And they sold it, I think, for a pretty healthy amount of money. Healthy enough that the financier, Great Point, made back their money plus some way before they were supposed to, and they turned around and they asked Parts and Labor, "What's next?" And Parts and Labor was like, "Well, we have this movie called Love After Love," and they just we had it packaged at that point, and they just like gave us the money right then, and so that that was a huge break, because that we had the movie packaged for a while and were kind of unable to raise the money, I think, for reasons that you just brought up, which are like these movies don't get made that often. There aren't that many, titles that you can point to and say like, see, it works sometimes,
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, from my experience, that's what I think about, is that we approached our work very seriously, and then we caught a lot of breaks.
Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I wish I had some kind of insight on this. I really wish I did. I feel like every year goes by and I have no real understanding. And I ask all my producer friends, like, how do these things work? And there's no straight answer on it. I think the only thing I think of whenever I come onto any project, any indie feature, is that there's so much out there now. There's so many movies, so many projects, so many TV shows. It's so important for you to, as a director or creative team, take as many risks as possible. Really push yourself. Don't be afraid to go out on a limb, because that's where you find your voice and your kind of unique, original stamp that you can put on your film, and that. I think that when it comes, that's the kind of the great thing about it, is I think that's really what separates one project from another, and that's why people do respond to projects like this, even though as a quote unquote like package or script or whatever, they might not be able to see it yet, but as a finished product, you get what was happening, and it's great that there are people out there that are willing to take chances on projects like this, but it's worrisome that I agree that I feel like there aren't as many people taking chances on a project like this as there used to be.
And I'm curious what you both think about. You mentioned Amazon a minute ago, but like Amazon, Netflix, some of these kind of almost non-traditional studios that have grown up that are doing like. I know Amazon has everything from Woody Allen films like Wonderstruck, like incredible independent films that they're behind. Netflix it seems like they're always acquiring something new. What do you think from a filmmaker standpoint, how they're going to impact the business going forward?
I think part of me doesn't care that it seems like kind of broadly good to me, that I'm like, I feel like we're in a bubble right now that maybe it might be the end of it. I know that Amazon didn't buy anything at Sundance this year, but I feel like the past several years, there's been so much money kind of pouring into these kind of independent films. This like a budget level, like the kind of $1 to $5 million movies. It seems like a lot more of those are getting made than they were maybe over the decade before that. And so I think that's a good thing. I'm worried about movies just disappearing onto like an app somewhere where they live. They have like a lonely existence that no one knows about. When I hear about those kinds of things, I don't like it. Things just, titles just, and nowhere else. I think that movies should be seen in the theater. But other than that, I kind of don't know what to say. I think it's a good thing that more money is being given to independent film right now, and I think it's allowing people to be more adventurous in the kinds of stories that they're telling. And other than that, I don't know where it's going.
I think movies are a richer experience the more you have the opportunity to talk about them with other people. And the hard thing, the great thing is that so much is getting made right now, but the hard thing is that everything's becoming so segmented that you're having less of an opportunity for for people to see the same thing and actually have conversations about it, which is just one of the most exciting things about seeing movies. It's analogous a little bit to the many conversations I feel like I've had with people who work with or are friends with, where we talk about music, and I say, oh, I like this band, and they go, I've never heard of them. I like this, and then they say, I like this band, oh, I've never heard of them. But then you go back into 5 different bands that neither of you have heard of, and then you're like, okay, well, what do we talk about now?
Right.
And that's, it's great that there's so much out there, but it's hard because you want to be able to share these things.
Right. Yeah. So with all that said, what does success look like for you guys with Love After Love? Like when are you guys? At what point are you like, yes, this is what we were hoping for. This is what success is for an independent film today.
Last week was pretty goddamn good.
Tell our audience about it.
I think.
Yeah, how did that go?
Well, I think we have had such a wait with this movie, and I think that happens. I think it's probably a common experience. But we made the movie. We shot the movie in November of 2015. We cut it for a year. It didn't get invited to Sundance, and so then we sat on it until April of last year when it played Tribeca. It got bought by IFC in June of last year, and then it didn't get released until last week, which was March 30th, 2018. And so I think that we worked really hard, and I think made something that we all knew was special and that we were proud of, and that we thought, reflected, a variety of interests that are, that I think are kind of compelling for anyone who loves movies. And I think we made something unique, and we had to be alone with that for a while. And so last week, when it finally, is getting, it's being reviewed and people are buying tickets, and it just has this. For me, it was very, very cathartic. I was moved all week. I couldn't stop crying, and I snuck into a matinee on Saturday, which was kind of basically after the dust started to settle. And because people started calling, immediately on Wednesday, which was the day of our premiere, I kind of woke up to these reviews where people were saying it's the role of Andie MacDowell's life and things like that, and people now may come to the movie with that as a kind of. They may take for granted that that's the kind of context that the movie may now exist in. But for 3 years, we didn't know if anyone was going to stand up and say this isn't a movie and laugh us off the stage or whatever. Right. So anyway, on Saturday, I went into a matinee. It was a 2:40 matinee. It was a 50-degree day in New York. It was very nice outside. But I walked into IFC after the movie started, and I sat in the front row. It was packed. And at the end of the movie, as the credits rolled, they clapped. And it was such a bizarre, surreal moment. And that to me is like, we all did our jobs if that happened. That like not only did people decide that they wanted to go, spend an hour and a half with the work that we made, but that then they were saying, like, thank you. And, like, so I was very moved by that. And everything else feels like bonus to me. I feel like that the movie now kind of exists in the world and is playing in theaters, will be playing in theaters across the country, and will, I think, reward people who want to spend, like, an evening with it. I think that we made something that kind of lives up to people, going out for dinner and going to a movie. And that just makes me super happy.
That's
wonderful.
Great. Just got the goosebumps.
I know.
When you said everybody clapped.
Chris, how about you?
Well, that was very well put. I mean, I feel the same way. I was getting emotional just hearing you talk about it. The greatest success of this movie would be allowing us an opportunity to do it again, basically. It's I feel very fortunate to have been able to make this with Russ. It's like such a wonderful collaboration, and it gave me an opportunity to do things as a cinematographer that I've never been able to do before and really push myself. And that's sort of my, that's my happy place. It's where I feel very fulfilled. So if we can have an opportunity, if the film has enough success to allow us to do something like this again, that would be the best possible outcome.
Totally.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Just want to end on one last question, and then we'll give you an opportunity to tell everybody where they can go see the film. But just listening to what you guys were just kind of going through, if you were going to give advice to another filmmaker who's just about to start, or you're going to give advice to yourselves 5 years ago, what is the one thing you need to have to see a project like this through to the end? Like, what is the one personality trait, one thing that you've got to have, like, to bring this thing to fruition?
I think you need to be obsessed about something, and, like, to have a relationship to the material that is strong enough that your interest in it will allow you to endure the inherent struggle of getting it made. I think that's kind of essential. That there were things about the movie that I literally kind of pledged my life to making. I waited tables for 5 years while we were writing the movie, and the thing that got me through waking up at 5:30 in the morning and turning over coffee cups for people in the Time Warner Center was that, like, I believed that on the other side of this there could be a movie that expressed this feeling of I can't catch up, I can't catch up, I can't catch up. And so to me it was like my advice to anyone would be, like, make sure that from the beginning that the project is originating from a place that, like, you don't know how to do it, but you're obsessed with trying to figure it out, because I think that'll carry you through the whole arc of the process.
That's great advice.
Yeah, Chris, how about you?
That's tough to follow up. I guess what I've learned is, it's with a very strange business like this, the tendency for a lot of people, myself included, is to get into it and only think about where you think you want to end up. That, all those people you admire basically ending up being one of those people one day, which is great. But I think you can't lose sight of the day-to-day of your life in that, because I've heard for most of us it's a very, very long, winding road with a lot of ups and downs, and you have to really focus on your day-to-day experience of what you're doing, whether you're a director, writer, cinematographer, and make sure you're actually enjoying it on that level and experiencing it in that way, and not in a where is this going to take me kind of way. Because if you do that, then it matters less where you end up, because you're really engaging with what you're making in the moment and enjoying it on that level. And I think that will, like, have a profound impact on your quality of life, which I think is really important. I am a pragmatic person, and I got that from my dad. So that's where that's where I kind of come back. I come back to that way of thinking of things, so I don't kind of spin out of control or lose perspective.
That's great advice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, even outside of filmmaking.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, where can people see the film right now, and what's happening next for it?
Right now it's playing at the IFC Center in New York, and it will remain there for the next couple of weeks. It opens in Los Angeles at the Laemmle Royal this Friday. Chris O'Dowd and I will be doing Q&As on Friday and Saturday nights after the 7:30 show. And then the subsequent week, it'll start opening all over the country. So those dates and cities will be forthcoming, but that's where you can see it.
Fantastic.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the great conversation and making the wonderful
Thanks,
film
guys.
you've made. And we really
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks so much.
It is a great satisfaction to be able to speak to you through the medium of this wonderful invention.